Claire never expected Nathan to come back. It had been years since she'd last seen him, their lives having drifted apart as time and distance worked their way between them. But when he suddenly returned to town, everything she thought she knew about herself was called into question. They had shared a bond in their youth, a friendship that had always felt effortless and real. But time had pushed those memories aside. Nathan's return stirred up old emotions that Claire had buried deep within herself. His magnetic presence, the familiarity of his voice, the way his eyes still held that same spark, they all ignited a restlessness within her that she hadn't felt in years. Claire couldn't help but compare the warmth she felt with Nathan to the routine of her life with Adam. Her marriage had always been built on trust, faith, and stability, but Nathan's return planted seeds of doubt in her heart. There was an undeniable chemistry between them, something unresolved from the past. And it only took a few conversations for Claire to realize that she had never truly let go. Now, she stood at the crossroads of loyalty and longing, unsure of what path to take or what consequences awaited her. Claire's life had always been predictable, grounded in routine and the quiet comfort of her marriage to Adam. But Nathan's return was like a ripple in a still pond, disrupting everything she thought she knew about herself. The moment he stepped back into her life, Claire was reminded of a time before the responsibilities of adulthood, before the weight of motherhood and marriage. She found herself reminiscing about their carefree days, when their conversations had flowed easily, and their laughter filled the air. But now, the tension between them was palpable, each glance charged with something unspoken, something deeper than just friendship. It was a dangerous pull, one that Claire couldn't ignore, though she desperately tried. As she watched Nathan interact with others, she noticed how effortlessly he commanded attention, how people gravitated toward him, and how her own heart skipped a beat when their eyes met. This wasn't the Nathan she remembered, it was someone more complex, more enigmatic, and infinitely more intriguing. And as the days passed, Claire couldn't help but feel the distance growing between her and Adam. Nathan's presence was awakening parts of her that had been dormant for years. And Claire was left to wonder if her longing for something more was simply a fleeting desire or a sign that her marriage had lost the spark it once had. The unease started to creep in slowly, like a quiet storm gathering on the horizon. Claire had always prided herself on the unbreakable trust she shared with Adam. But that trust began to feel fragile, strained. It wasn't just the small, innocent glances Nathan threw her way, or the way his voice lingered a little too long when they spoke. It was the way she felt herself drawn to him, as if he understood parts of her Adam never had the time to see. There were moments, brief, fleeting moments, when Claire caught herself thinking about Nathan even when he wasn't around. The spark of excitement, the rush of something unspoken, it was all too intoxicating. But guilt quickly followed, and Claire pushed the thoughts away, trying to focus on the life she had built. But Adam had changed, too. It wasn't just her he had started to pull away, too. Absorbed in work, lost in his own world, Claire tried to remind herself that her marriage, their family, meant everything. Yet, she found herself restless, anxious, always wondering if the connection she had with Nathan was just a fleeting moment of desire or the beginning of something more dangerous. Could she resist the pull? The tension between Claire and Nathan grew with each passing day, an invisible thread pulling them closer yet keeping them apart. They tried to ignore it, suppressing the undeniable chemistry that simmered whenever they were in the same room. Claire couldn't help but notice the way his presence seemed to fill the space around them. How his every glance lingered just a moment too long. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was something deeper, something unspoken that neither of them dared acknowledge. Claire, desperate to avoid crossing the line, threw herself into her work, focusing on her family, trying to convince herself that her thoughts of Nathan were merely a passing distraction. But there were nights, long and quiet, when the loneliness felt more pronounced. Adam had become distant, lost in his own world, and Claire's heart ached for the connection they once had. Nathan, with his warmth and understanding, filled that void, even if it was just in the smallest of ways, an encouraging word, a shared laugh. It wasn't enough to justify what was growing between them, but it was enough to keep Claire restless, questioning her own emotions. Was it just the allure of the forbidden, or was she truly ready to lose everything? As the days passed, Claire began to question her own desires, torn between the life she had built with Adam and the magnetic pull she felt toward Nathan. It was a feeling she couldn't shake, no matter how hard she tried. Every touch, every lingering glance, only seemed to fuel the fire. Nathan wasn't just another man, he was different. His quiet understanding, his way of listening without judgment, awakened something in Claire she hadn't realized was missing. She had always believed in the sanctity of her marriage. But the more time she spent with Nathan, the more it felt like she was living a lie. Adam's absence, both physical and emotional, had created a void in her life. One Nathan was unknowingly filling. He was the confidant she hadn't known she needed. The source of comfort she had craved. Claire tried to convince herself it was just an innocent friendship. But deep down, she knew it was something more. The late-night conversations, the subtle flirtation, the way her heart raced when Nathan was near, she couldn't deny it. It was a dangerous game. And she was already too far in. The excitement she once felt with Adam now felt distant, replaced by an anxiety that made her question everything she thought she knew about love and loyalty. Claire's mind was constantly at war. Her emotions tangled in a mess of guilt and longing. She had always been proud of her marriage, the life she had built with Adam, and the family they had created. But Nathan had become a silent presence in her thoughts, lingering in the quiet spaces of her heart where Adam's absence had left a void. It wasn't just the late-night conversations or the stolen moments of laughter that made Claire feel so torn, it was the connection. The unspoken bond that grew stronger with every passing day. She tried to ignore it, convincing herself that it was nothing more than a fleeting attraction. But the truth was undeniable. Nathan had come to mean something more to her than she could explain. And every time he was near, her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and dread. She knew the stakes were high. If anyone found out, it could destroy everything she had worked so hard for. Yet, when Adam wasn't around, the moments with Nathan felt too powerful to resist. The excitement she once felt in her marriage now seemed distant, replaced by an overwhelming restlessness, a feeling that she couldn't ignore any longer. Claire was standing on the edge, and with every choice she made, the ground beneath her seemed to shift. As the days passed, Claire found herself drawn deeper into the complexity of her emotions. The tension between her and Nathan had been building slowly, like the gathering clouds before a storm. At first, it had been easy to dismiss the moments of connection, casual touches, lingering glances, but now, each interaction felt like a spark waiting to ignite. Adam's absence only amplified the growing distance between them. While he was away on business, Nathan's presence became a soothing escape, filling the quiet spaces Adam left behind. It wasn't just about attraction anymore, it was about something far more profound, a connection Claire couldn't put into words but felt deeply in her bones. Her heart ached when Nathan was near, and the restlessness inside her grew with every shared moment. She tried to convince herself that this was just a phase, that her loyalty to Adam would ultimately overpower the pull she felt toward Nathan. But the more she resisted, the stronger the pull became. Claire found herself wondering what life could be like if she allowed herself to follow this dangerous path. Was she losing herself in a fleeting desire? Or was this the opportunity to finally embrace the passion she had long denied? The uncertainty gnawed at her. And for the first time in years, Claire questioned everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and her own desires. One evening, as Claire sat alone in the dim light of their living room, her mind raced. Nathan's words, his presence, had left an undeniable mark on her. The stillness of the house felt suffocating. Adam was still away, and she couldn't escape the growing restlessness that clawed at her from within. The life she'd so carefully built with Adam seemed distant now, as if it were something she could no longer touch or understand. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Nathan, to the quiet moments they'd shared. She remembered how he'd reached out, not with the forceful urgency of someone pushing boundaries, but with a gentleness that left her feeling exposed in a way she hadn't expected. The tension between them had always been a low hum, but lately, it had become something more, something dangerous, something irresistible. Claire tried to shake it off, telling herself that this was just a momentary lapse, that it wasn't real, but deep inside, she knew it was. The conflict tore at her marriage, her love for Adam, the life they'd promised to build together, all crumbling under the weight of a desire she hadn't anticipated. What was this temptation? Betrayal, or something in between? She couldn't say, but one thing was certain, she couldn't keep pretending. The days that followed felt like an emotional blur for Claire. Adam's return was inevitable, but each passing hour brought with it a growing sense of dread. The silence between them had become palpable, like an unspoken truth hanging in the air, refusing to be ignored. She tried to keep things normal for the sake of their daughters, for the routine that had once brought her comfort. But everything felt off now. Every time she looked at Adam, she couldn't shake the image of Nathan, of the touch that lingered on her skin, of the way her pulse had raced when their gazes met. It was as though she was living two lives, one with Adam, the man she'd shared so much with, and another with Nathan, A forbidden connection that was impossible to deny. Her mind wandered, replaying their last conversation, the way Adam had tried to brush off the unease she had been feeling. How he'd seemed so distant even when he was physically present. It was as if the love she had believed to be unbreakable was slipping through her fingers. Claire found herself torn, caught between the life she knew and the chaotic, intoxicating pull of something she hadn't planned on, something that could shatter everything. Claire stood at the crossroads of her life, facing a decision that would define everything moving forward. As the days passed, the tension between her and Adam grew, fueled by the weight of unspoken words and lingering glances. She could no longer pretend that everything was fine, that the love they had shared was enough to patch the cracks that had formed between them. The reality of what had transpired with Nathan loomed over her like a shadow. Impossible to forget, as much as she wanted to believe in Adam, in the vows they had taken. The truth was undeniable. The connection she had felt with Nathan had awakened something inside her. Something she couldn't ignore. The emotional battle was exhausting. Her heart longed for the safety of her marriage, for the familiarity of what they had built. But her mind screamed for something more. Something raw, something real. She had spent so many years focusing on everyone else, on Adam, on their daughters, that she had forgotten to listen to herself. What did she want? What would she choose? The uncertainty paralyzed her, but it also gave her the courage to face the truth, to finally step out of the shadows of fear and guilt. She knew one thing for sure: change was inevitable, and it would demand more than just strength to navigate. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to ignore the subtle cracks in relationships until they become impossible to ignore. Just like Claire's journey, sometimes we get so caught up in the routines and expectations of life that we forget to listen to our own needs. It's important to recognize when things feel off and to have the courage to address them head-on. Open communication, understanding your own emotions, and setting boundaries are key to healthy relationships. Don't let fear or guilt keep you from making decisions that align with your true self. Trust yourself, and seek clarity before it's too late.